Hello everyone, this is Simon from the Food Power team. Welcome to our webinar. Before we go any further, can I check if people's are hearing me? So if you could go up to the attendee chat on the left-hand side, click on that, and then just type in where you're joining from. And also it'd be interesting if you could just say in one word how you heard about the webinar. Was it Twitter, the Food Power newsletter, an email, a friend or a colleague? Just really interesting to know how you've heard about it. So if you could do that in the attendee chat now. And for anyone struggling with sound, any meeting does work better in Chrome or in the app. And I'll type that in the message now. So we've got people from, it's updating. We've got people from Scotland, Durham, Lothian, Plymouth, Oxford, Hertfordshire, Enfield in London, Greater Manchester, Winchester, Flintshire in North Wales, Worcestershire. So a really great mix. Excellent. So I'll just run through some basic housekeeping about the webinar, talk briefly about Food Power, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Ben. So the attendee chat is where we recommend that you ask questions. So during the people's presentations, we won't be responding to questions within each presentation. We'll take them all at the end, but as you think of them, write those in the attendee chat, and I'll keep a record of them and make sure we ask them to the presenters all together at the end. There is a private chat that you can see as well, but only we're able to see that on the presenter side, so that's not very helpful unless you want to say something to us in private, because others won't see your question or comment. And the attendee chat is also a great space to share any information about your projects. You can put hyperlinks in there, put email addresses if you want to, etc. We are recording the webinar, so we'll publish it this afternoon after the webinar, so that'll have the slides and the audio recording. So we'll email that out to everybody so that you can share that with colleagues and friends as well. And just to give you a little bit of information about Food Power in case you aren't aware of it. So we're a UK-wide programme. It's delivered by Sustain and Church Action on Poverty, and it's funded by the National Lottery Community Fund. The aim of the programme is to strengthen communities' ability to reduce food poverty by tackling the root causes where that's possible at the local level. We work with about 50 local partnerships, networks. We call them Food Poverty Alliances, but they take different forms, and they're based all over the UK. And the webinars are actually a really great opportunity to connect people from around the UK who maybe would find it harder to meet in other ways. Over the last 2.5 years, we've been working to create a peer learning network to develop and share solutions and responses to food poverty between different alliances and networks. As a program, we've been offering financial support for alliances. We offer regional learning networks, peer mentoring, resources such as the toolkit we're publishing today, other advice and webinars like this one. So we'll provide some links at the end of the webinar. We don't want to distract you with them now, but we'll provide some links to the Food Power website, the toolkit we're publishing today, and some other videos, etc., that people will be mentioning. So I'm just going to hand over to Ben now, and then I'll pick up again with you for the Q&A at the end.
Thank you, Simon, for your introduction there. Hi, I'm Ben from Church Action on Poverty, work alongside Simon and Maddie on the Food Power programme. Before we get started, I'm just going to move on to introductions with my co-presenters who are going to be joining me today. Once we've introduced ourselves, which I've already done, I will kind of explain what the webinar is about, a little bit of an overview, and then we'll kind of get started. So, as I said, Ben Pearson from Church Action on Poverty. Robin, who was joining from Blackburn with Darwin, is unable to join us now, so I will be doing a little bit of an overview of the work that the young people have been up to there. but now I'll let the others introduce themselves.
Hello everyone, I'm Hannah Fenton from Good Food Oxford.
Hi, I'm Lisa from Food Plymouth's Food Equality Project.
Thanks, Hannah and Lisa. So the webinar is an hour long. In a moment, I'm just going to talk for 5 minutes about the toolkit, how that came about, and what it's kind of focused around. I will then hand over to Hannah, who will talk for around 10 minutes about the work with people with lived experience in Oxford. Lisa will then have the same amount of time to talk about the work that she's been doing in Plymouth. I'll then give a brief overview of some of the work that's been happening in Blackburn with Darwin with young people, as Robin won't be able to do that today. And then Simon will facilitate a Q&A session at the end. So we should have around about 20 minutes left at the end to answer any of your questions. Like I said, Simon as well will be keeping a track of any questions in the attendee chat during the webinar. So if there's questions whilst any of the three of us are speaking, do please add them to the chat, but we might not be able to respond to those straight away. So as you all know, the toolkit is being launched today, and as Simon said, we will be sharing the link to where that is online at the end of the webinar. So where did the toolkit come from? So for the last 2.5 years, my role within the Food Power programme has been working to support alliances to empower people with lived experience of food poverty. So at the beginning of the programme, we kind of call it expert by experience piece of work within the program. Not all alliances and not all individuals really like that term now, so we've kind of moved to people with lived experience of food poverty. But as the toolkit suggests, we're very much kind of supportive of people self-identify about how they choose to label or identify, if you will. So the toolkit is built around learning from the last 2.5 years. It features both case studies from around the UK, Plymouth and Oxford. Both have case studies in there alongside others. It also features some practical guidance, both for alliances but also for people with lived experience themselves. So things around when you're attending a meeting or when you're attending perhaps a committee, how you might want to prepare for that. There's also practical considerations around things like expenses and travel arrangements for people. But alongside that, the toolkit is kind of shaped around 4 core principles, really. And most of the case studies fit around those 4 core principles. And these 4 core principles have kind of emerged over the last 2.5 years. There's probably more to them, but I think all of the alliances working with people with lived experience have done work around these 4 core principles, and they're what we think is important when we're working alongside people with lived experience. So I'm just going to talk briefly through what they are, and then you'll see as Hannah and Lisa speak about how some of their work and how Blackburn with Darwin as well, when I speak about what they've been doing, links into these. So the first one is co-production. The second one is building relationships. The third one is influencing and impact. And the fourth one is building a social movement. So you'll see when you read the toolkit that very much the case studies are built around these 4 core principles. And many of these interlink, so they're not kind of sat there on their own. Obviously, good relationships are important when co-producing, vice versa. So much of the time, some of the examples that you hear about today will incorporate more than one of those principles. So as we each take a turn to talk about the work in each of the 3 areas that we're focusing on today, we'll kind of touch back on these, and then if there's any more questions about how and why we built the work around these, we can have a discussion about that at the end. So I'm now going to hand over to Hannah from Oxford, who's going to be talking about how their alliance was built around people with lived experience of food poverty. So thank you, Hannah.
Hello there, everyone, and thanks so much, Ben. First of all, I just want to say that I'm definitely no expert. I'm just learning, and we're all learning from each other. But these are some of the things that we have discovered together so far. So, Good Food Oxford, a little bit of background about us. We're part of the National Sustainable Food Cities movement, one of more than 50 cities taking action. And we have developed a set of strategic priorities. So, our second strategic priority, good food for all, is where our food power work fits in. And we want to make sure that everyone in Oxford is able to eat well every day. So a lot of people think that Oxford is a very affluent place, and there is a lot of affluence in Oxford, but I really want to highlight that we have a lot of deprivation here as well. It's a tale of two cities. And when we did some research back in 2015, we went and talked to people in community centres, and around half of them said they were experiencing some form of food poverty. And all of our food poverty, food access work has always been about getting things in people's own words and trying to amplify voices. So the food power work really contributed in to this way that we were driving our approach to food poverty and food access in Oxford. And the Food Access Alliance that we set up felt like the next positive step. So the Food Access Alliance, instead of just taking people's words and trying to amplify them, we've actually wanted to create something that was involving and led by people with lived experience of food poverty. And we call those people experts by experience. Those people were then joined by professional experts. So we have 6 experts by experience, 6 professional experts on our alliance. And between us, since summer 2017, we've been developing our work, and we've certainly developed a focus on upstream solutions rather than downstream responses, such as campaigning for a national plan to end hunger, to fix universal credit, and for an Oxfordshire living wage. And then we've also worked together to set up and develop and enhance community-based projects. And we're calling for a food access action plan for Oxford. So that's kind of very rough overview of everything that we're doing as an alliance. And I really wanted to take the principles, the 4 principles in the toolkit, and talk a bit about how our alliance has noticed those emerging and what that looks like in Oxford. So I've put relationships first because the alliance is really 100% about relationships. It's absolutely fundamental, the relationships that we've developed over time. So first of all, in terms of getting people actually interested in joining the alliance, really people came to the alliance through personal contacts, and we also recruited people through trusted gatekeepers like advice workers or people who ran a community centre. So that's how we recruited our experts by experience and our professional experts as well. It was through personal contacts, really. We did have a flyer, but generally it was in a personal approach, and then here's a flyer with more information about what we're trying to do together. We spend a lot of our meeting time on relationships. So we tend to meet about every other month. And I would say half, if not more of that, is about building the relationships. We do eat together. And also we've visited inspiring projects around the country and in Oxfordshire. And that has been brilliant for building relationships with each other. When we go on residentials, overnight stays, we've been on a shopping trip where we've all had a thank you voucher for £20 to spend. And then it's just all the incidental stuff, the jokes, the in-jokes. You know, I'm really bad at crossing roads, so everyone jokes about having to look out for me and make sure that I don't damage myself when we're out and about. There's one of our alliance members who really hates hummus, and we always keep getting fed hummus, which I'll mention later. And there's all these kind of little things that just come about through getting to know each other and learning to trust each other. I would say the difficulty around relationships is about things like personality clashes. Sometimes those things can't be helped. Misunderstandings, no matter how well you are trained in de-escalating conflict and non-violent communication, people can sometimes get upset with each other. And, you know, to be honest, I've just had to learn to step back and that I can't be everything to everyone. So if there are relationship difficulties, which we have had in our alliance, then, you know, ultimately there's only so much you can do, and you have to kind of let those relationships take their course. Co-production. Okay, so this is us when we were learning how to be community researchers on a retreat in Manchester. For me, co-production has been about a process of unlearning. So it's fine if I've got a meeting agenda, but actually it's much better if I'm shelving my meeting agenda and learning to go with the flow of where the energy is with the room, with those people with various expertise, bringing in, you know, what is the most important thing for them. And it's really about following the energy. So, for example, we've evaluated our food services map, and that just came about not randomly, but it came about in a alliance meeting where, you know, we said, okay, well, let's just get this map up on the screen and have a look at whether it's got everything that it needs to have on it. We also came up with the next stage of our work, which we'll be developing over the next year or so in Cutslow, and that was due to a section in one of our alliance meetings where we did some informal gap analysis, and we realised that this area in North Oxford called Cutslow was really underserved, and that's actually led to a significant piece of work. Co-production, we've produced together the meeting guidelines, we've produced the visit guidelines. We've also come to an agreement about what food people want and don't want, and hummus is definitely off the menu for a lot of people. We've chosen who to visit together. We've shaped projects together. And also, I think co-production of language is important. So one of our experts by experience said to me the other day, I don't have lived experience, I've got life experience. And haven't we all got life experience? And, you know, I think that when we're meeting each other on a level, then everyone's life experience is important. So I think a key part of our alliance in terms of co-production has been that we recruited our experts by experience first, and then they chose the professional experts that they wanted to join the alliance based on those professional experts' knowledge and their power to make things happen locally. And we also co-created our aims and our theory of change together, and we check back on that on a regular basis. Are we still following our aims? Does our theory of change still work? I think the difficulty with co-production is actually getting professional experts to attend and kind of be on a level with people. That sounds a bit dismissive, but you know, I think our meetings are really powerful and impactful. But like I say, they don't necessarily follow the agenda, and you can't immediately see what are the outcomes from that meeting. It's much more longer term. So sometimes our professional experts just aren't willing to put the time in. And let go of what they're trying to achieve. And actually, the way that we're trying to address that is by taking our learning to them and going to them, maybe a deputation with myself and one other person from the Alliance to present all the things that we've found and created. And that seems to be the way to take things forward. So building a movement. This is us at the End Hunger UK Day of Action back in October 2019, and we held an invisible feast in Bond Square in Oxford to highlight hidden hunger in Oxfordshire. So half of the table were eating a delicious 3-course meal, and the other half of the table had invisible food that they were pretending to eat. And this was really saying that, you know, as I was saying, a lot of people don't realise there's an awful lot of food poverty in Oxford, and we need to talk about it, raise the issue and address it. So there's a video which I'll give you a link to at the end, and that's got a really good video of the actual day of action, so you can get more of an idea of that. But the actual day was a process of co-production. One of our experts by experience came up with it at a training weekend, a residential weekend on activism, and the actual day of action itself was led by one of our experts by experience. We came up together with the idea of the invisible feast, and we had an intern available to us at that time, who we as an alliance tasked with the job of creating a flyer with figures on hunger in Oxford and Oxfordshire. We used area profiles and food bank figures to give the approximation of food poverty, because there's no national measurement of food poverty yet. And we also created a press release and letters to our MPs across Oxfordshire. And then our Oxfordshire Food Bank colleagues, they're volunteers, and they all sent the letters that we created out to their MPs. So we had coverage across the whole of Oxfordshire. That resulted in 1 newspaper article and 3 items of radio coverage. I think the radio is a very good medium for an invisible feast. And I would say, in terms of building a movement, the difficulty is that not all experts by experience want to get involved with everything. And really, you just have to, again, go with the energy and have a wide enough range of activities available that people can get involved how they want to, and can lead and follow as they want to as well. So in terms of influencing and impact, I think, you know, yes, we've been going since mid-2017, but in the grand scheme of things, we're quite young. And I would say that this is the area that is difficult so far, and that we're really looking to keep developing. And it's really about being, you know, rated and respected locally and nationally. So we are going to take those letters back to the new MPs this year, and we want to take all that we've produced out to professional experts, policymakers and people in power. We've been to the House of Parliament, and we're going to the House of Lords shortly with Food Power, and that's a really great way to get our voice heard nationally. We as Good Food Oxford try to work locally, and then we try and send things up to the national level. And, you know, we're going to keep calling for a food access action plan for Oxford. It's not been taken up by enough actors yet, enough influencers, and the difficulty really is getting them to listen. You know, we have there are some serious issues, and we have some possible solutions here, and we just need to keep campaigning for change. So I would say our aims and our theory of change are strong. We're progressing well. We keep checking in with each other against those aims and changes. And I want to finish with the African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. Thanks.
Thanks, Hannah. That was great, and I'm sure others agree will really inspiring some of the work that's been happening in Oxford. So I will now move on and introduce Lisa from Plymouth, who's going to talk about some of the creative work they've been doing down there. So over to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Ben. So yes, just to briefly introduce the Food Equality Project, which is part of Food Plymouth. So Food Plymouth is the local food connecting hub for all things food in the city of Plymouth and outside. And the Food Equality Project, which has been running, funded by Food Power since early 2019, is really to build the community aspect of capturing the picture of what's happening on the ground and feeding that into a local action plan, and building an alliance. So in many ways, we are, we're quite early on in some ways in respect of building the alliance. And I think it's worth pointing out that our main mechanism of recruitment and speaking to people with lived experience was using creative approaches. So to date, we have really focused on, so initially, scoping out settings and speaking to people, and then coming along with a range of creative materials. And this was basically the first contact that we had in many settings in Plymouth. As you can see, we used, so to date we've had 7 creative workshops in the city. They're basically quite large scale events. We've had as many as 50 people during the summer holidays, sort of lunch at the libraries. And we've used mapping, collage, zine, we've recorded interviews, and basically that is how, so in every setting, it's been quite different really. First of all, we started out with, okay, so first of all, the main thing is to remember that, oh God. Okay, sorry about that. The main thing to remember is that for many people, this is the first contact that we'll have with them. And really the theory behind the creative methods is that there's lots of research out there which says that it fosters co-production, builds relationships, and that it's participant-led, and that the conversation can lead on to whatever anybody is interested in. The themes that have come up for us at the workshops have been availability of healthy food, shopping habits, cost of food, holiday hunger, and also school meals. Okay, so the benefits and challenges of using creative methods in various settings. You can come up with conversations that are local, specific to the setting, personal, participatory, in that people feel comfortable, they're doing something, they're sharing. We usually bring food, and it's a kind of 2 to 3 hour sort of relaxed, sociable event. Conversations are inclusive, and then the materials that are generated by the activities and the things can then be shared and used as a basis for further sharing and conversations. The challenges specific to using creative methods are, it's not for everybody. We try and bring a range of activities and materials to people to try. Some people just want to have a chat. It's trial and error depending on the setting and what people will want to do on the day. You need to be flexible if something's not working. You need to sort of maybe ditch it, try something else. And some learning from me around using creative methods in various settings. And I'll talk a bit about some of the core principles next. But it's just remembering that everybody's story is valid. It's really important to remember that people own their story. And when it comes to sharing the materials and the images, that's something really important to remember as well. And also to manage expectations about what next, what happens after you've built that initial relationship and contact in that setting. I think it's really listening about the best way forward. So today I'm just going to focus on one setting. So as I said, we worked in a number of settings in Plymouth. I'm just going to focus today on the Live West Community House in Barnbarton, where Live West Housing Association have a community house. Time Bank members also use the house, so it's a combination of Housing Association residents in Barnbarton and their Time Bank members. And one of the important things, so coming back to the core principles, one of the nice things about the Time Bank setup is that we're aligning with an existing initiative. Time bank members, so the co-production ethos is there straight from the very beginning, because whatever time they give to the project and involvement, they engage back in the time bank system. So at the community house, my initial contact with them was a 3-hour workshop where we had, I knew some of the participants already through previous work in the area, and we used some of the creative methods. We created some really interesting imagery, we recorded interviews, and I really got a sense of what was the various issues and priorities of individuals in that setting. There is a community fridge located in the community house, and a lot of the time bank volunteers, 1 or 2 in particular, are really active in coordinating, managing the food, distributing the food, and they're the point of contact for other people in the area who are in need of accessing emergency food as well. So following on from that session, which took place in September, I've been visiting the house on a regular basis. They meet weekly on a Tuesday. I try and meet at least twice a month, and I'm working with them next to. And basically, what's interesting about that setting is that working with sort of 5 or 6 of the time bank members are the very, very different perspectives and priorities which are evident to people working in that setting. And at this stage, it's trying to work out how those interests and priorities can be built and developed to inform our developing alliance. How can those local priorities, what can we do to create change with this group in a way that works for everybody, and how can that then inform the local priorities of developing Food Alliance for Food Plymouth? So going back to the creative methods again, a couple of practical considerations is the setting, thinking about where is comfortable, where are people going to be, and what sort of facilities there are, and is that a place that you're going to be able to come back to regularly, and also recognizing the contribution, and our project has very much been around sharing personal experiences and stories, and it's really valuing that contribution, and also understanding that it's not easy to share some of those stories when people are talking about the circumstances. Okay, so the next thing, so as I've said, it feels in some ways like this is still in the early stages. So we're looking at the benefits of the creative approaches for co-production and for building relationships. I mean, I think in some cases that has been very successful in starting out. And I can see our work now developing a different strand. So the creative methodologies will continue in some form. We will be co-curating the output of the workshops. We have audio recordings, which we want to develop into little podcasts to share them. We'll be using some of the imagery to set up an exhibition, and the idea around that is that exhibition could be taken around to various locations, used as a basis for further conversations and sharing, perhaps further recruitment, and just to keep the conversation going in new settings. And also the idea of sharing stories and sharing experience. We will continue to align with local developments and take those forward where possible, and look at how to build the capacity of the active time bank members that we're working with, what sort of skills and training they might need to take their solutions or priorities forward. And then I think the last 2 core principles, maybe we're starting to think about how to implement those, really, how to influence and impact, how to galvanize all that information and represent it so that we can, and maybe link in with other research and other local initiatives to think about how we can, gain some momentum and have some impact on local policy. And then after that, hopefully building our alliance, building a movement, and then linking in the people with lived experience in Plymouth, link them more into the Food Power Network so that they can take advantage of the resources and activities on offer there. Also really important to say in terms of practical considerations, is having a kind of informed consent when it comes to sharing stories and information with a wider audience. It's really important to discuss right at the beginning, the purposes of the project, the aims, the implications of sharing your story. And we have developed an ethics policy and a framework so that people can sign informed consent. And that's something that we discuss all the time. If we're showing anything in the public realm, that's always with the knowledge and that comes from the person who produced that image or information. So that's really wraps it up. So just making sure that the other thing to remember as we go forward is the managing the expectations and working with individuals' lived experience and sort of being the person, the professional in that setting, trying to manage everybody's expectations and always remember that that's the point of the program is to work with the individual's lived experience and in that way develop the program from that perspective. So that wraps it up. Okay.
Thank you, Lise, for that. That was really great. So I'm just going to spend about 3 minutes, hopefully now, just to quickly give an overview of what Robin was going to talk about today. I probably won't do it as justice as Robin would have. And then hopefully that will allow enough time for you to ask any questions. So with Darwin Food Alliance, it's built around Child Poverty Together Lancashire, who lead on the alliance, have been doing work around It's a Poor Do, so running conferences and doing work around child poverty more generally for a few years. So they decided within the Food Alliance, with close to 50% of young people in Blackburn with Darwin living in poverty, to have that young person focus. So there's a group of around about 10 people who kind of take a lead on the project. They started off in the early days kind of I think the main thing, and this is something we talk about in the toolkit in terms of recruitment, was actually young people recognising that they were in poverty, because it was quite normalised, because if 50% of kids in school are living in poverty, it probably doesn't stand out that much. So as young people started to recognise, actually, I'm living through this, they started to speak out about their stories of growing up in poverty and what that meant. And lots of young people who were carers and had parents with disabilities and such forth, so started talking about the challenges and how that impacted on their education and other parts of their life. They then wanted to kind of take telling those stories and really start coming up with some solutions and sort of speaking out more and becoming activists within their own right, rather than people who just talked about being poor, really. So they launched the Darwin Gets Hungry campaign around about a year and a half ago now, something like that. And that's gained kind of recognition across the UK and even internationally now, about the work that they've done and about how it's been young person led. And 3 of the young people in Blackburn with Darwin became ambassadors for the Children's Future Food Enquiry as well. So that's a very quick overview. There's lots in the toolkit, there's lots of resources around the work that Blackburn with Darwin have done, and there's quite a lot with that they've done with the media and short videos and things like that that could be accessed online. But just very quickly touching upon some of the core principles that we talked about. So yeah, year and a half ago, started with Darwin Gets Hangry. That's been a combination of direct action. It's been doing campaign work in schools. It's been raising awareness. It's been challenging stigma. Young people have created podcasts. They've delivered workshops to peers in other schools, where different groups of young people, so young people experiencing homelessness and various different things like that. Then secondly, moving on from that, so as the Darwin Gets Hangry campaign sort of built up, Blackburn with Darwin alongside Newcastle, who are one of the other alliances who have done lots of work with people with lived experience and again feature in the toolkit, co-designed tools with Lancaster University, and last June at our conference launched the toolkit, Tools for Food Stories. Again, co-production really important here. Young people and those up in Newcastle said how important it was that the tools that and conversations that the tools allowed to happen were very inclusive. So hence the word Tools for Food Stories, that they could be used by anybody. It wasn't just food poverty focused, but could help people feel more confident to start talking about food poverty. So all those tools are available to access free online. And again, there's a link to those in the toolkit that we'll tell you where it is in a moment. And then moving on from that, right at the beginning of the project, 4 of the young people did a little short video, kind of 5 minutes, kind of a talking heads video about their experience of growing up in poverty. A year down the line, they wanted to do a film or something again, but they decided they wanted to work with some young creatives, so a director, producer, photographer, to produce kind of a contextualized film around their lives. So it kind of was semi-detached from what they were experiencing, but very much based around their stories. So end of last year, Edgeline's film is called. It's around 15 minutes. The stories are built around the lives of the young people in Blackburn with Darwin and some of the issues they experience. Not just food poverty, but also homelessness, drug use, sexual exploitation. That is accessible online as well, and there's a link just at the bottom of the page there. So that's kind of the journey of where it went from people telling the stories to then co-creating their own projects and starting to build a movement. And I think, as Oxford and Plymouth have both said, something that we're really keen to do now in the next kind of 12 months is build a movement amongst those with lived experience, but also alongside activists and allies across the UK and across alliances working with experts. So there's that kind of solidarity between them. And that's already started happening, as you see some of the pictures that Oxford had of residentials and things that have happened that have allowed us to bring some of those people working in different areas of the UK together. So that is a very quick overview of what's happened in the last kind of 2.5 years in Blackburn with Darwin. But now I'm going to hand back to Simon to facilitate the questions. So please ask away. Thank you.
Thanks very much, the 3 of you. Really interesting. I was just in Sandwell in Birmingham yesterday, visiting the group that we're working with up there, a group of disabled people, people with mental health issues and other health conditions. And it was fascinating being part of their conversation that they were having around food. And like Hannah said, there wasn't a sort of fixed agenda, but there was a clear plan and some sort of very powerful stories, but also some really practical suggestions for what they wanted to see change in their area came out of that meeting. So please write your questions in the attendee chat. I've just got a first question while people are typing their questions. Just for some people, this area of work is pretty new. So I just wondered if the 3 of you just had a suggestion for what people could do as their first step beyond reading the toolkit that we'll share a link with too in a moment. But what would you say if people want to start moving into this area of work, empowering people, involving people? What do you think is their next step they should take?
Yeah, thanks everyone. really happy to start on that question. I think the most important thing from my point of view is to have an opportunity for reflection and ask yourself some questions about whether you have the resources or how can you get the resources in order to run an alliance in this way or to convene an alliance in this way. I think it's really important for people like me to be aware of what am I trying to achieve, who do I have relationships with, what or who could I connect with each other. And I'm not saying that you need to have a fully set out plan in your head, because all this will change, and hopefully it will change as you are influenced by every person who joins you on the journey and who you join on their journey. But I really do think that I have a responsibility as a messenger and as a connector, and I'm carrying people's stories just like they're carrying mine. But my responsibility and my ability to respond are really important, and it's I think it's vital to know where you're coming from and what kind of influence or connection you can make. What's your unique contribution?
Thanks, Hannah.
I think, from my point of view, I think it's about being really flexible and being prepared to take the time, not to kind of panic if people kind of being engaged, being understanding of people's kind of situations that they have going on, and letting those individuals that you're working with take a lead. So everything from the length of a meeting, where a meeting takes place, whether it's a meeting itself or it isn't a meeting, how often they want to meet, what food they want to eat, making sure that all their costs are covered and they're not losing out in any way, and really ensuring as well that it's an enjoyable experience for people, as much as some of the things that people will be sharing, what will be sensitive and carry lots of emotion with them, that as much as possible, being involved with an alliance or with a project is something that allows people to gain skills and knowledge that they wouldn't have had the opportunity to gain if they weren't involved. So as much as they're giving, you should be giving them as well.
Okay. So just speaking from somebody, I suppose, who's fairly recently started out with this process. So starting out with a plan, as Ben mentioned, it can be easy to sort of panic a bit if things don't go according to the plan, perhaps. So my suggestion would be to be flexible, but also to think about focusing and maybe on one setting, one group of people, and just work with them, meet them regularly, get to know them, and manage those expectations and make sure that it's an enjoyable experience, and just see what emerges from those conversations and try to go with that.
Thank you very much, the three of you. Ellen from Bournemouth has been asking about the any sort of food power or other similar activity happening in Dorset. I'll get back to you outside of the webinar about that, Ellen, if that's okay. If you can send me contact details via private chat if you prefer, or just email me, simon@sustainweb.org. I can share some information with you. Peter has asked about some examples of how people sharing their stories has changed things in practice in their areas. Would one of you like to go first with that one?
I'm happy to give an example. Yeah. So one example in Blackburn with Darwin is where young people involved in the Children's Future Food Inquiry, one of their sort of asks was that free school meals, with the name of them was changed to school meal allowance, to sort of remove some of the stigma and make it feel more inclusive. So one of the schools in which those girls attended, took that upon them and changed the name. So although the school meal allowance hasn't gone up, and there's lots of other things that can still be improved. Just that one small change can make people feel a lot more comfortable in accessing their school meal.
Thanks, Ben. Another Ben has asked about how the experiences of people with food poverty, how they themselves or their experiences can feed into sort of wider food partnerships and strategies in a local area, whether that's people perhaps getting involved more widely in a food network, or perhaps their experiences indirectly being broadcast to a wider audience within the food movement more generally. Lisa or Hannah, do you have a response on that one?
Yeah, I can touch on that, and maybe on the earlier question as well. I think, it's going further together, so it is small steps, but I would say that gradually, as a movement, we're getting food up the agenda locally. It's hard to necessarily attribute that to individual stories, but I certainly think that the local solutions that we've helped to get in place, like there's a new community fridge and a new community larder in Blackbird Leys, and that was thanks to our alliance members really kind of pushing for that as an area where there was a gap. I certainly think that individuals who have shared their stories and been able to get themselves on local panels and also nationally have built confidence and skills, just like I've built confidence and skills. And one of those people who was volunteering with homelessness has since got a job in homelessness, and at least partly attributes building the confidence and skills to all the different things that she's basically put herself forward for recently as part of the alliance. So rather than that person's individual story and the details of that person's story causing a change, it's more about the kind of the sector moving just a tiny bit and her skills and experience growing. And we've certainly been contributing individuals' voices into the Oxford Living Wage campaign, which has really got a head of steam on it. I think as far as representation goes in the future, we definitely want an alliance member to come and join us on the main Good Food Oxford steering group, and that will be a way to incorporate the alliance into the kind of wider Good Food Oxford picture.
Thanks, Hannah. Lisa, I'll just read a couple more questions and then come in on whatever bit you'd like to. So Graham from Aberdeen has asked about the sort of initial meeting or event you have with people. How do you sort of manage that in a way that it's introductory, you're not getting too caught up in sort of big details and perhaps scaring people off a bit? How have you gone about that? And then Peter has asked about people's lived experience of Healthy Start vouchers. So for anyone that doesn't know, are vouchers that are available, funded by the government to buy fruit, veg and milk. A question there about how people's lived experience of that scheme, because it's not the most easy to use scheme to use for individuals and to access. So are there other examples of alliances using the lived experience around Healthy Start to generate change, I guess, in their area?
Okay, well, Simon, I'll just say a little bit about the workshops and the venues that we've used in Plymouth about scaring people off. Oh God, okay. What I've done is done a little bit of initial meeting and scoping with gatekeeper type people, perhaps meeting quickly with groups and introducing the project and what we will be doing. Then generally people have been pretty receptive actually to the idea of just spending a couple of hours over some food. The creative stuff is completely optional, but I have done some local promotion and flyers around other groups who I think might be interested, and that's been varying degrees of success. But yeah, it has been a good way into building relationships. But then, so it's worth noting that we started out throughout year one, we probably engage with about 90 individuals in that way, but probably currently working in an in-depth way with a much smaller group, maybe sort of 6 to 10 individuals on a regular basis. So yeah, swings and roundabouts.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah.
Hannah, did you want to come in?
I was just going to say that we try to be really careful with language, and in that first session we tend to talk about food, and we don't tend to talk that much about food poverty. We talk more about food access and hunger, and there's like a whole range of different terms that you can use instead of food poverty. Yeah, I think our flyers and some of our case studies and things on the Food Power website maybe go into that a bit more.
I'd kind of back Hannah up on that very much across the alliances that I work with, it's about taking the time, and yeah, the first few meetings, or what you want to call them, will be conversations more about food or the community, or what happens in school, or whatever it may be. I don't think you can kind of go in there and expect people to talk about their experience of food poverty in 2 or 3 weeks, for example. Again, even more of an issue if people don't recognise at the start that they've been experiencing poverty. So I think it's very much around taking the time, but also I think language is really important, and meeting where it is that takes place is also really important, and linking in with all the things about, is it just going with a small group of 2 or 3 people to a cafe for a brew? Is it something that happens outside and some of the conversation happens whilst there's some activity going? It's kind of trying to think a bit out of the box of how, and I liked what Hannah said earlier about unlearning, that lots of us are kind of stuck in a way of learning that a meeting has, and we're trying to think differently about where these individuals that you may want to work and engage with, where would they normally be meeting their friends? You can kind of go and find them rather than them fit around your way of working, or your typical rules.
Great, thank you. Peter, I've just shared some resources about our work on Healthy Start as part of Food Power, and some of the case studies in particular do mention the sort of research and other kinds of investigation that some alliances have done to really try and find out particularly why some groups in particular, or people living in a certain area of their town or place, have had trouble accessing Healthy Start. So hopefully that's useful. I'm now just going to share the link to the toolkit. So you're the first people we've told about the toolkit. It's hot off the press, so we'll be telling people via the Food Power newsletter next week, but it is on the website now, so you're obviously welcome to have a read, download it and share it. Just got a question from Vera. Have you seen interest from other local community groups and activists who don't traditionally focus on poverty and inequality come out in support of the projects and campaigns led by these inspiring people? Vera is just wondering about that from a perspective of connecting up local food movements across different food issues. Would anyone like to respond to that?
Just want to plug our living wage webinar as well, and say that the living wage campaign and the unions have been really supportive. So that's been that's been really great. So they see how having a living wage and food poverty are very closely connected. And I just also want to big up the new toolkit. I do think it's really good. So well done, Ben and Simon and all for producing that.
Thanks, Hannah, and thanks for that compliment. We're going to end the webinar now, but I will leave the webinar running for a little longer, just so people can still use the chat to share any thoughts or contact details or any other information. But thanks very much for joining. You'll be getting an email later on today with a link to the recording and the toolkit, and also a link to our next webinar, which will be slightly different theme, looking at some enterprising responses to food issues, Meals on Wheels provision, and community food enterprises, bringing in some visits that a colleague and I conducted overseas. So that's on the 24th of March, but as I say, there'll be a link in your email. Thanks, everybody, and have a good weekend. Afternoon.
Thanks, Simon, and thanks, Lisa and Hannah, and all those who had joined the webinar as well.